Tom Daly with Oral History at Deerfield, and our guest this afternoon is Marilyn Hubbard. So, Marilyn, let's start with your full name and where were you born?
Okay, my full name is Marilyn Sue Kessinger Hubbard, and I was born in the middle of the cornfields of Illinois in a small town called Pontiac, Illinois.
Okay. Who is the earliest ancestor that you know about, and where and when did they live?
Well, ancestor would probably be my great-grandfather on my mother's side, Friedrich Bauer. He came from Germany and started a church in Comfort, Texas, in the German hill country of Texas. And he and his wife came and started a church there. And we had a chance to go visit there a few years ago. So.
And are they the oldest ones that you remember?
That I know of, that I know something about.
Yeah.
I also had a great-grandmother on my father's side who was still living until I was about 8th grade, and she came from Germany also.
Okay.
So.
Tell me about your parents. Where are they from, and what did they do for a living?
All right. My mother was born in St. Louis, lived in St. Louis for a while, and then moved to Carlinville, Illinois, in the center of Illinois. And my father grew up on a farm outside of Carlinville, Illinois. So they met when they were in high school. And my mom went off to Kalamazoo, Michigan to run a catalog store for Montgomery Ward. And my father came up to visit and they eloped. But then he came back to Illinois and started school at the University of Illinois. And she finally was able to come down and join him.
Any stories about their courtship or how they met or anything like that?
Well, they met, I think, in high school. My dad, I think his cousin and my mom were good friends, and I think my mom asked his cousin who that cute boy was. I think that was the start of it.
And what did they do for a living?
Well, my mom did not go to college, and but she was very, very good with numbers and with typing and things like that. And so ultimately, she was a secretary for both an attorney and an insurance salesman. And so she did that. And then my dad did go to college, went to Blackburn College in Illinois for 2 years, and then to the University of Illinois. And he started out teaching agriculture and chemistry and shop and driving a school bus and doing all sorts of things in a small town. And then ultimately was with the Federal Land Bank Loan Association. So he worked with farmers. He grew up on a farm, worked with farmers all of his life.
What kind of siblings have you had?
0. I'm an only child.
You're an only child.
Yeah.
Okay. And what was that like for you growing up as an only child?
Well, I think there are always advantages and disadvantages in something like that because I don't have any siblings who remember my parents when I was a child. But I did have, starting in 4th grade, I had a friend who lived across the street, and she was also an only child. We moved to that town, and she was also an only child. And my mother had red hair, and Mary Ann had red hair, and everybody thought that Mary Ann was my mother's daughter instead of me. But we were together all the time. We played piano duets together, and we did all sorts of things, all from 4th grade on through high school. So that was, in a sense, it was like having a sister, but we didn't fight because there was no sibling rivalry. So we didn't fight, but we had the fun of being together.
Did you keep up with her over the years?
I still do. I haven't seen her in many years, and but we write to each other at Christmas and on birthdays. And
okay. Tell me about the buildings that your family lived in. Do you remember that?
Oh, I do. Yeah. When I was 1, I think we moved to Lamoille, Illinois, which was a big city of 500 population. And we lived right across the street from the grade school. My dad, it wasn't a grade school, it was a first grade through high school. And my dad taught there. And so it was a little house. It had, I think, 3 bedrooms upstairs, but one of the bedrooms was being used by the person that they rented from and for storage. And then downstairs, I think there were 3 rooms. Well, maybe 4 rooms. Maybe, I guess the dining room was slightly separate from the living room, and then 2 other rooms. And it had a long porch along one side, and then also a porch on the front, and a separate garage. But it was small. And then when I was in 4th grade, we moved we moved to a house that had been owned by the person who was the Federal Land Bank person in Amboy, Illinois. And my dad took over his job, but my parents also bought their house. But the idea is that it was a fairly large house, and so Mr. and Mrs. Griffith had an apartment upstairs. They maintained an apartment upstairs. And then we rented 2 rooms to high school teachers. And then my family and I lived downstairs, my parents and I, except in the summertime. And then in the summertime, I got to live in one of the teachers' rooms over the summer, and then back to my bedroom. But my bedroom, this was, I did a reading for Writer's Read about bathrooms I have known, because this particular house had, on the main floor, off of my bedroom, so you had to go through my bedroom to get to it, a toilet, sink, and that was it. No shower, no bath. Downstairs, my dad in the basement had rigged up a shower, and upstairs, shared by Mr. and Mrs. Griffith and the 2 teachers during the school year, had no shower, but it had a bathtub. It had a toilet up on a platform, so we called it the throne room, and a sink. And so in the wintertime, Mr. and Mrs. Griffith shared that bathroom with the teachers. And then if I wanted to take a bath, rather than a sponge bath, I had to ask permission, is anybody going to be using? And I truly don't know what my mother did. I don't remember. I've thought about this, and I have no remembrance of how she managed all of this. But it was a lovely house. It was a really nice house. It just was kind of weird.
Yeah. Do you remember of the neighborhood that you grew up in?
Yeah, well, when I was until 4th grade, we were in this little town of 500, right across the street from the grade school, high school, and they had the teetotters and the swings and what have you, so I could run across the street and play on and all the kids in town would gather there, and it was a much safer time for kids than now, and so we would run all over the neighborhood, but mostly we would gather in the schoolyard because that's where all the things were that we could play with. So.
What schools have you attended besides the grammar school?
I went to Monmouth College in Monmouth, Illinois, a small liberal arts college, Presbyterian, and graduated from there. And then I went to Southern Illinois University and received a master's degree in Spanish and a minor in French. And then while I was teaching at the University of Missouri, I worked on some linguistics courses, and I have close to a master's degree in linguistics, but I never was there long enough to do the thesis, so I don't have a second master's. But
Anything special happened while you were at Monmouth College?
yes, indeed.
Tell us about that.
I met my husband in French class my sophomore year and his senior year, and he needed help with French and I needed help with algebra, so it was a match made in heaven. And he lived right across the street. He was a townie, so he had a car, which made him very popular, and I really liked the fact that I could get off campus from time to time. Our first date was the football game the first weekend after school started. And after the football game, he said, would you like to see where I live? And I knew he was from town. I said, sure. So we got in his car. Actually, we got in his parents' car. He didn't have a car of his own. We got in the car, and we drove for a half hour all around town. And then finally he pulled up in front of a house directly across the street from the campus. And I said, why are we stopping here? And he said, this is where I live. So the Hubbards rented rooms out to college students. So I would take all my friends over, and particularly when Bill went off to graduate school, I was still in school. And so my friends said, well, we can't go over to the Hubbards now. And I said, well, of course we can. So we would go over to the Hubbards and hang out. And there were always at least 2 college boys rooming there. And so that was fun.
Did you have a favorite teacher in all the schools you went to?
Yes, her name was Dorothy Donald, and she was a Spanish teacher at Monmouth College. And so, yeah.
How did you celebrate holidays with your family?
When I was a kid, it was mostly just my mom and dad and me. When we were first married, our second home that we lived was in Eureka, Illinois, which was about 120 miles from each of our parents. It was like a triangle. And so Bill had one sister. I had no brothers and sisters. Every Christmas, every birthday, every major holiday, we all either went to the Hubbard house or my folks' house or our house. And I think that's probably pretty unusual when you have the in-laws being good friends of each other and getting together as often as we did. That was very special.
Yeah. So to change gears a little bit, what brought you to this place, to Deerfield?
To Deerfield. Well, we lived about 12 miles away, and Bill's predecessor, when she retired, had researched various CCRCs in the area, and she had decided that Deerfield was, in her opinion, was the best. It was long before Tooten was built. But she had decided that Deerfield was the best, and we put our names here and at another CCRC. But Bill took me for my 60th birthday for a free lunch at the first of the retirement communities that we looked at. We didn't go there. Now, I don't know whether it was because it was a free lunch for my birthday or what, but we did have our names at 2 different places, but had long decided that Deerfield was the one, and we did have some friends who lived here at Deerfield too.
And you've been here?
We've been here 9 years. Yeah.
Okay. So what were you like growing up as a child? Who was little Marilyn?
Little Marilyn loved to sing. She loved to be involved in things. She loved to be in front of an audience. It kind of stuck. She still loves to be in front of an audience. I learned to play by myself a lot. I had friends and I played with kids, but I also was very comfortable being by myself too. And I loved to read. I first heard about libraries when I broke my leg and had to, it was a rather serious break, although I broke it in the middle of the living room floor, twirling around, and I fell and I landed on my leg and broke it. But my parents went to a nearby town to a library and brought me back books. And I thought, this is just wonderful that I could have all these books. And so I read a lot as a child.
Yeah, and you still do.
And I still do, yeah.
Are there any stories that have been passed down in your family?
Well, some of them I really would like, in my copious free time, which I don't seem to have, do a little bit more genealogy, because there were 2 stories passed down in my dad's side of the family. One that one of my ancestors had followed Daniel Boone and followed him down. And the other one is a story of a nun and a priest from Germany who got together, married, and came. And I don't have any proof of that one. I did have a great uncle, my grandpa's brother, who every time he went to another town, he would look at the phone book and see if there were any Kessingers. If there was a Kessinger, he would call them up and say, who was your father, grandfather, what do you know, and things like that. So whenever we would go visit them, my great uncle and his wife, he would tell these stories that he had gleaned. So I'd like to do more about that, but I haven't.
What was your first job?
My first job occurred just about 4 or 5 days after we got married. I went to summer school for 2 summers so that I could graduate early, so that we could get married, because Bill was already through graduate school and working. And so he was at Southern Illinois University as a science librarian. And I finished my student teaching and my senior thesis and graduated. And then we got married a few days after that. And then we had a 2-day honeymoon. And then on January 1st, we packed up the car in northern Illinois and traveled 400 miles south to southern Illinois. And the next day was January 2nd, and it was the start of classes. And Bill, bless his heart, said, Marilyn, we lived in a 2-room, not 2-bedroom, but a 2-room university housing. And he said, you've been so busy and you're going to be so bored. He didn't tell me I had to go to work, but he did say, maybe you'd like to take a class for fun. So 9 o'clock in the morning on January 2nd, we went into the foreign language office. I told the director that I was maybe interested in a teaching assistantship in the fall. And she asked me a few questions and then said, come back in a couple hours. And she had just found out that one of the teaching assistants was stranded in Mexico and was not coming back. So we went back in 2 hours. And she said, all right. And it was as if I didn't take it then. I might not get it in the fall. She said, you could have a teaching assistantship now. You'll take 2 graduate courses and teach 1 class, and you'll start tonight. And I said, I don't know where I'd visited Bill once with his parents for a weekend and a whole semester that he was down there before I got down there. So I knew nothing about the campus. I said, I don't know the campus. I don't know the curriculum. I don't know what textbook you use. I don't know where the lab is, the foreign language lab is. She said, fine. She said, I'll have someone teach for you tonight. So my very first job, I sat with my students. Many of them were older than I because they were coming back for a night class. And I took notes. This is where the language lab is. This is the textbook. This is this and this. While somebody else taught my first class. And it went from there.
That's quite a story.
That's quite a story.
did any of your family served in the military, aunts and uncles? Or
I had one uncle, my dad's brother, in the Army, and my mom's brother in the Navy, and they were both in World War II. I don't know anything about their service, but I do know that they were both in World War II.
Now, did you and Bill have a family?
We have 2 children, and my daughter has the 3 grandchildren. And I think I was 25 when Laura was born and 27 when Evan was born.
So tell me about your grandchildren.
Oh, proud grandma. You know, grandmothers always have to brag about their grandchildren. But we have 23-year-old twins, Kyle and Kira. And Kyle graduated a year ago, #1 academically from the Air Force Academy. And he was also on the competitive flying team, flew Cessnas competitively. And he's currently going to Carnegie Mellon on a full scholarship and studying international relations. And he'll finish in another year, and then he'll go to the NATO pilot training. And I watched Top Gun Maverick and suggested maybe he could find a desk job because I'm not really sure I want to see him flying jets all over the place. But that's neither here nor there. His twin sister graduated from the Terry Business School at University of Georgia, and she's currently working for Stryker Medical Equipment Company in the foot and ankle division, and she stands next to the surgeon during surgeries with her little tray of plates and screws and screwdrivers and what have you. And so she's doing that. And then our 21-year-old granddaughter is a fabulous artist, and we think that she will someday be she's already shown her work in about 22 different galleries and received awards and things like that. So we're thinking that she'll probably go ahead.
I can tell you're not very proud.
Well, if they were, just sort of run of the mill, I'd still be very proud of them. But I think they're sort of worthy of a proud grandmother and grandfather. Yeah.
What organizations have you been a part of, and what do they do?
I'm not particularly a joiner of organizations per se, but since we've been here in the Asheville area, and Bill was director of the library at Warren Wilson College. Warren Wilson has a fabulous summer program of music, 5 weeks of Celtic music, old-time music, fiddle, banjo, mandolin, singer-songwriter, guitar. And Bill and I volunteered all 5 weeks every summer for about 16 years and took classes there, and also worked registration, and we were the bouncers at the staff concerts. And
well, that leads me right into my next question is, what music do you like, and how does music impact your life?
Music's very important to me, and it is to Bill too. It's interesting. He cannot carry a tune or clap his hands in time, but he listens very carefully, and he listens more carefully to music than I do. And I play the piano and used to play the clarinet, and I sing. But I sang with Woman Song for about 16 years here in Asheville, and I'm singing with the Deerfield Chorus. I play the piano and sing over in Skilled Care twice a month, and it's called Marilyn and Friends, and folks come with me and sing with me. I like jazz, the Dave Brubeck, the Duke Ellington, the modern jazz quartet, that kind of jazz I really, really like. I also like Celtic music. We came to like, through the Swannanoa gathering and through being in this area, old-time music. which we hadn't really been exposed to before. But when we came to the area, this was such a big part of the culture of this area, of this mountain area, that we began to learn more and more about that too. But I like music. I like good music.
Other than those things you've already mentioned, do you have any hobbies, and have you ever played sports?
Definitely not sports. I'm a klutz. I think probably I was always one of those that, was the last one to be chosen in grade school, for being on the team. Not sports. What was the first part?
Any other hobbies?
Any other hobbies? I consider myself a dabbler. I like to try things to see if I can do them artistically. And once I do them and discover I can or can't, then I move on to something else. But I probably have had most enjoyment out of photography. And my dad also had an Argus C3 that you had to have a light meter and all of that. And but he would take pictures of weddings and then run right home to the dark room, and I would help him in the dark room. And he was always so worried, would the pictures show, would they be good or not? And of course you took you took your film pictures, so you didn't take 50 million like we can with the digital camera, But I think photography has, I discovered the first time I got a digital camera that would connect to my computer, that would connect to my printer, opened up a whole world for me. And then what I started doing is printing my photographs on two sides and then cutting them up with an X-Acto knife. And that started another strain of things that I enjoy doing. So it started with that technology that I had sort of resisted, because I certainly didn't want to have something like an Argus C3 that I had to really think about. So.
Okay, switching gears, how has the world changed since you were young?
Well, it's not as safe as it was. At least, growing up in small towns. I grew up in small farm towns, and so that was, that was really safe. Technology, of course, has changed it for everybody. And I remember when I first started teaching, and I taught Spanish, and I gave a lot of quizzes, and I had a lot of grades, columns of grades for each student. And I would add them up, and then I would, it's my phone ringing. Was that gonna, we'll just let it ring. I would add up the columns, and then I would add them up again, and then I would have Bill add the columns up, just to be sure that I was giving the proper grades to my students. When I got a first calculator, and I think we paid $20 for our first calculator, I was so thrilled, because I no longer had to add all of these figures up. Now, I still go through them 2 or 3 times, but I'm much more secure in the answers than I was before. So technology, I mean, and talking about cameras. My first camera that I really owned myself was a point and shoot. And again, it was easy to handle. I didn't have to use a light meter or anything like that. Now, most of my pictures are with my iPhone, and I have it with me. So with a camera, I often missed shots because I didn't have the camera with me.
Yeah.
With my iPhone, I can get it.
So you remember a time when you didn't have television?
Oh, I do. I remember the first television that we saw was at a neighbor's house. And all the neighbors would gather there and watch this little box with snowy black and white pictures. I was in 5th grade, I guess, before we got our own television.
Now, you mentioned a phone. You haven't had a personal phone that you carry around with you all your life, have you?
Oh, no. And I remember that in the small town where I lived until I was in 4th grade, we had one of these phones that was on a stand with the whatever it is. And our number was 159. And then when we moved to the bigger town of Amboy, Illinois, which was about 2,000 population, they still had the switchboard that the switchboard operator would plug in, and it was right by the railroad tracks. So if the train came through, sometimes the plugs came out, and she had to rehook you up. So yeah, big difference. But I imagine that everybody here at Deerfield had similar phones, similar experiences.
What are your memories of events such as segregation, the civil rights movements, or wars?
I think that the civil rights movement was probably more successful because of television, because these events were being shown on television, and that's how I saw them. Again, growing up in the middle of the cornfields of Illinois, number one, in most of the places I lived, there were no African Americans. I didn't have any contact with them. It wasn't until I got to college, and then there were only just a handful when I was in college. So I really didn't have that growing up. But then when we were first married, and after we were at Southern Illinois University, Bill went to Eureka College in Eureka, Illinois, which was Ronald Reagan's alma mater. And we used to laugh and call it a hotbed of apathy because this was during the time of desegregation and what have you. We did have a few African American students there, though, and that was probably my first real contact.
Who had the greatest influence on you as a child or as an adult?
I think quite possibly I would say my father, because my father was always a teacher. I mean, he taught school for a while, but every time we took a drive, okay, we have lakes here because the glaciers didn't get down that far, and so we have lakes to get the water. We don't have the underground, like, or this field has this and this and this in it. And so every trip involved some sort of learning. And he also would tutor me. I'm not good at math at all. And he would tutor me, and he would, in chemistry, anything that involved something like that, the neighbor kids would come and we'd sit around our big dining room table and he would tutor us. And so between my freshman and sophomore year in college, my dad and I sat down and he said, well, what are you going to be taking this year, this sophomore year? And I said, well, this, algebra, this and this. And he says, algebra? He says, you can't. And I said, I have to. He says, you can't. I said, I have to. What do you mean I can't? He said, I won't be there to help you. So, of course, that was the semester I met Bill, who is very good at mathematics. And that's how I made it through algebra, when I was a sophomore in college. But my dad was sure that I was not going to be able to manage this.
Have you experienced or observed prejudice or racism in your life?
I would say not directly. I mean, obviously, I was in a field, I was a teacher. Women, that was one of the, teaching and nursing, that was one of the few jobs that I thought were available to me. That's what I knew. And so women had jobs as teachers. I didn't try to become a scientist or it just wasn't in my thinking, But I know, I know by reading, I know by seeing that there's an awful lot of racism, there's an awful lot of anti-women in certain businesses, and so yeah.
Yeah. What kinds of values did your family or community teach you? And are there ways your views have changed over time?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think my parents taught by example. I don't remember any sort of direct "you will" or "you won't." What my father would always say is "do your best." So
That's a value.
and that is a value, do your best. But it was by example, I think, really.
What historic events have you experienced? Marches, protests, performances? Historic events.
Historic events. Well, we sat and watched the lunar landing, and our daughter was a toddler and our son was a baby, but we all sat in front of the television and watched the lunar landing. And Laura claims that she remembers us doing that. Again, living in small towns in the middle of the cornfields of Illinois, there weren't a lot of protests or parades or what have you. So yeah.
That's right. What would you say are the greatest challenges that you have faced in your life?
I've led a pretty special, blessed life. I don't know of any huge, major challenges. I've always, I learn quickly. I have some talents. People have liked me. I really haven't had huge challenges, and I'm very, very fortunate with that.
And last question, what are you most proud of?
Most proud of? Well, I think we raised two pretty special children, and our daughter raised three pretty special children, and I've got to think and the fact that we've been married 60 years and have enjoyed being together and are still enjoying when we're together. So,
anything else you would like to say, to share?
No, I'm grateful for the opportunities that I've had, and I'm grateful to be here at Deerfield. And while I'm here at Deerfield, one of the things that I really try to do, at night when I'm going to bed, I think about all the good things that we have and things that we shouldn't take for granted. And I think I'm thankful that I bring joy and laughter, and that I bring love and friendship, and that I bring sometimes comfort and sometimes healing to people. And that's my purpose in life. Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you so much for
You're
sharing
welcome.
with us.
You're welcome.